Back in the video about Lightning Ridge's mystery population, we talked about how hard it is to get essential services to a town with an unknown number of residents, in particular medical services. Now, Lightning Ridge, the town, has existed in one form or another since the early 1900s, and it was made official as a town around 1920. And it's had a population of around 5,000 or more people since at least the 1970s, but it took until the early 2000s for the town to get its own hospital. But that's not to say that Lightning Ridge didn't have medical services, because prior to the hospital it had an accident and emergency centre and a string of well-loved local doctors, and earlier to that it had the bush nurse. I spoke to Barbara at the Lightning Ridge Historical Society about one of the largest and most significant items in the Society's collection, the bush nurse's Cottage Hospital from 1914.
So here we have the Bush Nursing Association Cottage, and it was built in 1915. The first bush nurse came in 1914, and she didn't even get a chance to live in the building. They wanted to do a cottage hospital, but it cost twice as much. And a failing community during World War I just simply couldn't afford to pay the difference. The Bush Nursing Association was introduced to Australia by the Governor-General's wife, a lady from Ireland. And of course, she'd had great success in Ireland with the bush nursing scheme, but she had no idea of the distances in Australia. It was not an easy task. Our unit was, I think it was number 19 of 120 units that went in over 60 years, and ours was the longest serving, and the only one at the end of the scheme that could support 2 bush nurses. The building, this particular building, went out of service in 1955. It was considered derelict. But you can see today it's been refurbished. We did relocate it, and it's in a different position than what it was facing when it sat up the street back in 1915. So thankfully, here it is today, very beautiful. So let's walk up and have a look. And when you think that we had 50 nurses in 60 years here, it's pretty impressive. We got our first full-time doctor in Lightning Ridge in 1986. Now, we like to have people press their noses against the glass, but Nurse Lucy actually served here in 1919 to 21, and we had great support from people down in Sydney, the Randwick and District Historical Society. They organized with Prince Alfred Hospital to give us a couple of gazundas that were duplicates in their collection, nurses' capes, and items of medical interest that fit into the era of the 20s, the 30s, the 40s. And I think probably here the only original piece of machinery that might have come from the nurse's cottage is this. There's a funny little medical cabinet in there that looks pretty homegrown. It's a bit sort of angular, but very functional, I think you could say. So there's quite a collection, things from World War I, World War II, and traveling right up through when the service became part of New South Wales Health Commission, which was January 1st, 1975. So Nurse Lucy stands here in what should have been the nurse's bedroom. But as I mentioned, they couldn't afford the cottage hospital, and what the people actually did to make it a serviceable building, they cut an extra door in the side that would have gone straight into her bedroom, and that became her nursing unit. The front door, as we noticed, is on the other side as you walk up. This takes us right into the little living room, and it's a very basic sort of accommodation. We're told the nurse actually made her own furniture out of wooden crates. So this would have been the nurse's living room, and today it's our little photo gallery. We have featured the nurse in the front window, and also in her bedroom from this side. You can look through the window and see a few collected items that represent the mothers and babies. And every piece has a story. We have a lovely showcase, this end dedicated to the nurses, and we do know quite a bit about our 50 nurses in 60 years. And presently we have a young woman from the town who's working on the war nurses, because this year is the year of the nurse, 2020. Last year was the World War I nurses that they were honoring from those Gallipoli years. This end of the showcase then is dedicated to other parts of our history. The Race Club, which the inaugural meeting was in 1911 here at Lightning Ridge. And they used to donate money to the Walcott Hospital until the light bulb went on. Hey, let's get our own little hospital. And they pushed to get the bush nurse here at Lightning Ridge. And here's a look at the building before we removed the verandas. Because when the service went out of business, the people who bought this building actually turned it into a family home, enclosed the verandas, and had a sleep out for all their grandchildren. So the building came away as just a little cracker box brought down on the back of the truck. Things on the wall, of course, tell different stories about the nurses. We're pretty impressed with our nurses. I mean, some of them only stayed 3 weeks. I guess it was a little too much for them. We have quite a collection of information about the nurses and descendants who became nurses, who were inspired by various activities. I've actually seen the opals that our first bush nurse was given by the miners when she left the service here in 1916, I think it was. And you know what? She married the local postmaster when he came back from World War I. And they lived in Sydney, and she opened her own little ladies' hospital down in Haberfield. So with connections through her nieces, who loved her dearly, we've had quite a bit of information about Nurse Price, and of course our nurse Lucy, who stands proudly in our window. Her uncle and other relatives, nephews and nieces, we've heard from family members. And one of her relatives even rode his motorcycle all the way down from, I think it was Townsville. And he wanted me to open the window, and he wanted to give his aunt, great-great-aunt maybe, a hug. So our nursing story is pretty important here. And Gabby Hollows is our patron. We're very proud of that fact. Again, thanks to the Randwick District Historical Society, of which she plays a great part too. And you would know that Fred Hollows was active in the Burke community with his eye hospital, and he's actually buried at Burke. So we have a very proud connection to, even today, going on, the medical history of New South Wales.
So that is the Cottage Hospital, a beautifully preserved example of medical history from the New South Wales frontier, complete with Nurse Lucy. This video was made with the help of the Lightning Ridge Historical Society. Special thanks to Barbara Moritz. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to IDU Curiosity on YouTube and following along on all the usual social media channels. The links are in the description. Thank you for watching.